This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start spreading the news, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready to start spreading the news.
Hey, EJ, welcome to Monday night. Welcome to our audience. It's the 16th of October. How you doing?
Doing great, Paul. It's been a while.
It's been at least a couple of weeks, yes.
Yeah. And I haven't done my podcast in the last couple of weeks either. So since the season ended, I haven't had my dose of Yankee baseball. So I'm happy to talk about stuff.
Yeah, so it'll be good to talk about things. I've got a couple of topics. I always surprise you with them. You're so knowledgeable. And, you know, I only speak from the heart.
One of these days, but yeah.
Well, you've never let me down before. And I present ideas. And you know what I love? You know, we're both college professors. And one of the things I do, I have a class for freshmen who are aspiring teachers. And I try to bring in as many experts in the field as I can to talk to them, so they don't just get my perspective, they get the perspective of other people, superintendents, teachers, principals, etc. And I always tell them, like, I haven't told these people what to say. I just bring them in and they speak from the heart. They tell you what their perspectives are. And oftentimes, obviously, our perspectives are the same, but not always. And we have these great discussions and this great debate about certain things about education. It's sort of similar to the way we handle this. Like, I think I have some great ideas. I present them to you, and sometimes we agree. Sometimes there's a good point and counterpoint and things like that. It really works well. Yeah,
look, I think we have a good debate, and I'm not lying when I say I have no idea what you want to talk about. So what do you want to talk about?
All right, so these are right now. I've been writing a lot about Juan Soto. And so I have a couple of different Juan Soto things I want to talk to you about. And then the big news, I don't know if you saw it, but Kim Ng and the Marlins have parted ways. So I'd like to talk about Kim Ng and whether or not she fits with the Yankees, and then whether or not you, if you had the choice, would replace Brian Cashman with Kim Ng. And then if we have time, but I don't suspect we will, it's always fun to talk about the fact that Jordan Montgomery has now pitched 2 brilliant game ones and beat the Astros, which the Yankees didn't think he would even be able to pitch in the postseason last year. So we can talk about that and then anything else that comes our way. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right. So here's the Tuesday discussion question. And as you know, on Start Spreading the News, each Tuesday at 10 o'clock, we run a question. I present a question to our writers. And then they respond, and then the readers respond to the writers' responses. And it's always something having to do with the Yankees. And so, as I say, I've been hot on Juan Soto, been writing a lot about him. So we have to just have a little bit of a background here. I don't even know if the Padres are willing to trade him. He'll be a free agent after next year. But the rumors are he's on the market, or he will be on the market, and the Padres will be willing to entertain offers. So assuming that's true, and to make this a real question, because the immediate
I would
response,
love Juan Soto on my team, but let's continue.
Okay, so assuming that you could get him, and then assuming you could tie him up in a long-term deal, because that changes the whole equation. If you were the Yankees, what would you, if the Padres came to you, what would be your best offer to the Padres for Juan Soto?
It's a great question because I think he is on the block. I think you're right about that. And one thing about a player like Juan Soto is I think we overestimate how much it would take to get 1 year of Juan Soto.
Right, that's how come it's going to be with the extension.
See, I don't expect the Yankees. One is I don't think that really makes it cheaper because some team's going to pay $400 million for Juan Soto or something. But I think that I don't think that really changes things. Like I don't think that the opportunity to negotiate an extension with Juan Soto is all that valuable. I think you're paying for 1 year of Juan Soto.
Yeah, makes sense.
And because I don't think the Padres are re-signing him long term. And I think that he probably wants to test the market, and all power to him. He's gonna make a lot of money. Juan Soto's an interesting hitter. I mean, one of the all-time great young hitters to come up from the league. I mean, I remember when he was at low A, he put up like some crazy strikeout to walk ratio, hit a bunch of home runs. He was 18 years old or 17 years old, and it was kind of on everybody's radar. And he comes up, he's 19 years old, and basically since that minute, he has been one of the top 3 or 4 hitters in baseball. And he's still 24 years old. He's a lefty. Let's talk about some of the bad stuff. He's a terrible defensive player, and frankly has effort problems on defense, not just defense problems on defense. And that's been a kind of a refrain with Soto for a while. I think when he was on those really good Nationals teams, he was actually a pretty good defender. And I think he's been on some pretty bad teams and frankly some pretty dysfunctional teams. Maybe some of that's his fault. Maybe some of it's not his fault. And I think he's just been one of the worst defensive outfielders in the league. I think that hurts his value. But he's 24 years old. He's going to be 25. He's going to be a 26-year-old free agent. I think we should have learned our lesson with Bryce Harper, and that lesson is if you can get him young, get him young. Bryce Harper is still only 30 years old, and he doesn't have that much time left on his deal. Now, I don't think Juan Soto is going to kind of get the bargain that Bryce Harper got. That was a uniquely cheap deal, probably because the Yankees didn't want him, which is we've discussed that to death in the show. I just don't want that opportunity to come by. Money is only good if you use it, if you spend it. And it's kind of hard to see who the Yankees are going to spend money on over the next few years. They have some money coming off the books. They've tied up their big free agent, Aaron Judge. They're probably going to, I think Garrett Cole has an opt out that the Yankees can buy him out with one more year off the contract automatically, the CC Sabathia deal, basically. And so, I think there's an opportunity for the Yankees to spend money. I think if they spend $40 million on Juan Soto, they're not going to regret it. That some other guy came up they weren't thinking about. And I think they should do it. I think that
So what's your best deal?
So here's the thing. I'm not sure the Yankees have a lot of prospects right now that other teams want. And so I'm willing to trade basically anybody but Jason Dominguez at this point. There's a problem with the Yankees have a lot of infielders and the Padres don't need infielders. So that's not happening, right? The Yankees, the Padres don't need Volpe.
Angelo Reina's question too. Yeah. What do the Padres need?
Yeah, so they don't need Volpe. So the Padres have a situation that might feel familiar to the Yankees. They have 2 shortstops who are both signed forever and are really good shortstops: Fernando Tatis Jr. and Xander Bogaerts, and they have Manny Machado at third base, who's also signed forever. He's been slowed down a little bit this year. I think he was injured this year, but that side of the infield is tied up to the point that they have Tatis playing the outfield. And Tatis has had his own problems that we can talk about. I believe they have a second baseman. I just don't think the Yankees need. I don't think that Peraza, Volpe, etc. will be interesting to them. So let's talk about some of the other players that the Yankees have. Jason Dominguez. I'm really hesitant to trade Dominguez for a 1-year rental. Soto's a pretty good rental. I don't know if I would pull the trigger on that, but I'd think about it.
All right, so this is why I was saying you have to assume that the extension is there. Assuming you could have Juan Soto for 11 years, would you trade Dominguez?
Yes, but I'll be honest, I still consider him as a free agent, right? So I'm not really. I just don't accept the premise that the only way you get Juan Soto is by trading for him. And I don't accept the premise that Juan Soto is even negotiating an extension. We haven't heard about him negotiating with the Padres. I don't think he wants to be a Padre. Juan Soto's a young guy, and every indication is he wants to hit the free market. So I'm not sure that that's really a possibility. I also think Juan Soto's coming off not a down year, but his time with the Padres has not been great. And I think part of that's on the Padres and part of that may be on Soto. And I think that he probably doesn't want to negotiate right now. He's going to earn a ton of money this year. I forget what his arbitration projection is, but he's going to earn $30 million this year. He's not a cheap player anymore. And so I just don't see why Soto's negotiating an extension, or even if he would. And again, I don't think that's the price. I don't think you price you price the potential extension because the Padres aren't signing into that extension. So, Dominguez is the problem with Dominguez is that you need a center fielder. Dominguez is a center fielder. And I think Dominguez looks like he could be pretty good. He's pretty young. And I just don't think I would trade him for Juan Soto. I trade basically anybody else. Like, if you told me Anthony Volpe, I might actually throw him in. I'm not. Volpe's another maybe, in the Yankees would need a shortstop in that case. But Peraza, fine. Wells, fine. I mean, just go down the list. I think there's a package that could be had here. I also wonder if some teams are looking at some of these Yankee prospects and thinking, like, I can do better. Like, I can do better developing them than the Yankees. And Everson Pereira, someone like that. I don't think any one of these guys gets Soto, but I think there's a package of them that could get him. This is not a year and a half ago when he was traded at the trade deadline, and the Nationals got some pretty elite prospects for him. This is only 1 year. This is a 1-year rental. This is not, and it's a 1 year, $30 million or whatever his arbitration number is going to be. It's a lot of money. And so I think he's going to be relatively cheap. I mean, not like something, the Padres would only trade him if they get something they like for him. But I don't think the Padres are contenders next year. I think the Padres are a bigger mess than the Yankees by a lot. And they have made some really bad roster decisions that's going to hurt them. And I think that they need to rebuild. And that might mean getting a lot of guys that are kind of high in the minors like the Yankees have. The Yankees have a lot of not great, a lot of prospects who had bad major league debuts, or are very high in the minors. And I think there are question marks around. And I think that's perfect for a team like the Padres. Get some quantity, right? Go get Peraza and Pereira and, name a pitcher, right? And
or Spencer Jones or whatever.
Spencer Jones, Will Warren. I mean, again, Augustin Ramirez. I trade any of these guys. Like Ben Rice.
Drew Thorpe.
Drew Thorpe. I would probably put him in that trade. I'd consider it. I think he's probably the best pitching prospect the Yankees have. Maybe the best non-Dominguez prospect that they have right now. But I mean, I think that's all very reasonable. None of these guys that we've mentioned, except for Dominguez, are you would call like blue chip prospects, guys who are going to be top 50 prospects in Major League Baseball next year. And we haven't talked too much about this, but like, I really worry that no one wants any of the guys the Yankees just called up.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very real concern.
Yeah. So if I can unload any of those guys, I'll do it.
All right, so we're in agreement. I would go all in on Juan Soto. The only disagreement is if they said you got to give us Dominguez. I would, because I think the high of Dominguez is probably what Juan Soto is, because he's basically as good as anybody in the game as far as hitting. Maybe not outfield, but he is the active major league leader in on base percentage. I mean, the guy just gets on base. He averages 33 home runs.
He's a lefty.
Games.
He's a lefty. He's at the corner of your lineup for a long time. And right around the time that Giancarlo Stanton's contract is up, he will be a DH. Right. Mm-hmm. I think he's certainly a long-term DH, but I think for now he can play the outfield fine. And, I don't think he'll look great out there, but he'll make up for it with the hitting.
And he's 25.
He's 25. I think there's a possibility that he's got an extra gear in him once he kind of gets back into being on a winning team. Mm-hmm. And Soto is one of those guys that just kind of has a bit of a weird effort thing going on. And I don't blame him based upon, that really bad Nationals team he was on before he got traded. And then these just mess of a Padres teams that he's been on lately. He seems to love baseball. He's got personality. He's fun to watch. And again, he's a lefty who, I don't think he's a straight pull guy, but he can hit it over the short porch, and that can be really nice. Soto also kind of strikes me as the guy who can take advantage of a ballpark. He's a smart hitter. He's the kind of guy who can tailor himself to the situation. And that's great. Soto's one of the most fun players in baseball. Let me ask you a question though. I have an interesting trade scenario. So let's say the Padres are in rebuild mode, right? They say, look, this didn't work. We're going to fire our GM, which they're talking about. And we need to fix something. And they said, you can have Soto and there's going to be a prospect cost, but I want you to take Manny Machado as well. Oh. Would you do that deal?
Oh, all right. So from a pure, we're playing Stratomatic and it's not people, it's cards based upon, a player's lifetime statistics and their ability and all that. I think the answer is easy. Yes, I'll give you a ton of prospects or whatever for Juan Soto and Manny Machado. Manny Machado is, he's probably on the path to being a Hall of Famer. He's an exceptional defender. He's a good, at third base. That plugs a hole. You would now be plugging 2 holes. He is a bit of an injury risk. So back in 2019, he also had attitude problems when he was, at least with, I think he turned it all around in San Diego. Ironically,
he got kind of fighty when he was younger, right? He was an
and
aggressive
with the Orioles.
guy.
Yep.
But I think he's been kind of a team leader on that.
So that, I guess that part then goes away because, people make mistakes when they're younger and they acclimate, and he learned and he's better. So, I mean, that's at least a piece in the back of my mind. The other part of Machado was I was always worried about his injury history because he had some knee problems when he was with the Orioles, as I recall. And my goodness, I don't want to be bringing in a super high priced guy who's going to break down. But if I'm building the Yankees for 2024, and I'm saying, you know what, we've got to do something to really generate some excitement. It'd be pretty hard to say they're not very exciting if you all of a sudden you've got Manny Machado and Juan Soto to pair with Aaron Judge in the middle of the Yankee lineup. I mean, boy, that seems like a powerhouse.
I mean, look, Machado is a star player. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's a very strong defensive third baseman. He makes contact, has some power. He's been very, very good at times over the last few years. He was injured for much of last season, even though he played 138 games. I think he had a surgery right after the season ended, and was still a 3.5 win player and still a solid hitter. Not great, honestly, and I'm a little concerned about that hitting fallout. But I just look at that contract, and I think it's designed to be traded. So he got paid. So he signed a very long-term deal. I think it was the same year as Bryce Harper. So 2019.
It was the same year.
There's an 11-year deal, and it was a $32 million per year cap hit. But the years they kind of messed around with. So for the first couple of years of the contract, he got paid, I think, $32 million. So the average of the contract. And then for a few years after that, including I think this year or next year, he's getting paid 17. And then he's getting paid 39 for 5 or 6 years toward the end of his contract. Now he's still, I believe, he's going to be, the contract runs through his age 40 season. So it's a long-term deal, right? He signed a big deal. So there's a lot of risk in that contract. And look, he's the same age as Aaron Judge. So he's going to get old at the same year as Aaron Judge. Something to remember there, but it's only $32 million. And I think that's not going to look too high, toward the end of that contract as a luxury tax hit. And I don't know who else your third baseman is this year.
He fills the gap. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
So I think right now it's not a contract he would get, right? I think it's a bad contract. If he was a free agent, he doesn't get whatever the remaining money is on that contract. But the Yankees have kind of shown in the past they're willing to pay somebody a little extra money if they're to kind of get around the luxury tax. It's kind of what they did with Giancarlo Stanton. Stanton's cap hit's actually kind of, I think it's $25 million a year, but they're paying him like 35 a year or something like that because he got underpaid at the beginning of his contract. So Machado could be, I think, in a similar position. I think there's probably an opt out somewhere in that contract too, I'm sure. And whether or not he's someone you want to guarantee a spot in the lineup in his late 30s, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this. We haven't seen a world championship since 2009. We've been patiently waiting. That's now 14 years, 14 seasons. Since 2001, that's 23 seasons. We've seen only one world championship. So let's say that the Yankees get Machado and Soto, and they already have Rodon, and let's say he comes back, and they're just spending. They move heaven and earth this offseason, and they're spending a lot of money. But we know that the tail of those contracts are going to be terrible. It's going to be, you're going to have an over-the-hill Judge, you're going to have an over-the-hill Garrett Cole, you're going to have an over-the-hill Manny Machado. But in the meantime, the Yankees win the World Series in 2024. I think 10 years ago, if somebody made me that deal, you get one world championship, but you're going to have a whole bunch of down years because they all get old, I think I would have said no. But it's been 14 years. I think at this point, you tell me that they're going to win a World Series in 2024, and then we're not going to be able to win a World Series in 2030, 2031, 2032, and 2033 or whatever, I think I make that deal.
I think so too. I think the Yankees are, if the Yankees had called up a bunch of their young players and it looked like they had 3 or 4 kind of like core future players, I think I start playing for the long term. If Anthony Volpe had a season that made him look like a future star, I think I'm playing for the long term. I don't think we're there, right? I mean, maybe Dominguez, but we only saw him for a week. I think that you play for the short term right now, and I agree with you. Look, I think if you sign Soto to a long-term deal, the nice thing is that he's 6 years younger than Aaron Judge.
Correct. That's
right?
That's one of the reasons you get him.
Right. So at the very tail end of that Judge contract, Soto will be still, at a, not necessarily the prime, but will be very good, hopefully still. Machado's a tougher call, right? And part of my premise here is that the Padres kind of want to dump Machado. Maybe that means you hang on to more prospects. Maybe they take a little bit of money. I mean, again, I don't think that's a good Machado deal at this point. I don't think it's a deal that he gets today. So I don't know. I think I think that one thing that might change your calculus is what I call the Atlanta Braves problem. The Atlanta Braves are no longer in the Major League Baseball playoffs. The Atlanta Braves were the best team that I can remember in a long time this year. I mean, just an incredible dynamic team, a team that you kind of expected to go far. And as we've talked about in the show many times, the playoffs are a crapshoot. And, they are not going to win the World Series this year. And the Yankees could go into the playoffs stronger than they have. Not just a team that won a lot of games in the regular season, but unlike the last few seasons, a team that went in healthy and ready to go and looking good and you're confident in, not just kind of limping into the playoffs. And they could still lose. And they could lose just because it's baseball and teams lose. And the question is do I want a World Series, or really, I think the question is, do I want a solid shot at a World Series? Right? Do I want the Yankees to try to put together the best team in baseball? And that's a harder question.
Yeah, I have my answer on that. Yes. And and when you phrase it that way, I think you hit the nail on the head to what my frustration has been all these last numbers of years. I know the playoffs are a crapshoot. I get it. But I've never felt for the longest time that when the Yankees have gone into the playoffs, they've gone in as the favorite. They've gone in as an underdog. We've all looked at the weaknesses. You say, well, they don't really have a good enough rotation, or the bullpen's beat up, or 2 guys are injured. They're all slumping. They had a bad September, whatever it is. Every year there seems to be, when they actually were getting in, reasons why you say they're just not that good. I wish they had a left fielder. I wish they had some more lefty hitters. I wish they didn't all strike out so much. And then they lose. And when they're expected to lose and they lose, that's not really a crapshoot. That's the result that you sort of expected. But if the Yankees went all in, we basically said this last winter when the Yankees, they signed Judge and then they re-signed Judge and then they got in Rodon. We're like, if they just get a left-handed hitter and a left fielder or something, like if they really prove to us they're getting the best team on there, and then you lose, I have less problem with the team losing in the playoffs if I know that they went all in. And I just haven't felt the Yankees.
Look at the Rangers this year, right? The Rangers, they got Marcus Semien to a deal that's going to hurt in a few years. They got Corey Seager they got Jacob deGrom to a deal that hurt immediately. They got Corey Seager to a deal that's going to hurt in a few years. And then they went out and got Scherzer. They got Max Scherzer. And Jordan Montgomery, which we'll talk about.
And Aroldis
Chapman. They went for it, right? They went all in. And maybe it turns out, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I mean, they're looking pretty good right now. And I think their fans are probably happy about that. And I hope that they remember those warm memories in a few years when Marcus Semien is 35 and making a lot of money and and all that, because they trade away a lot of guys to get the guys that they just got. So I think it really depends on execution, right? Like, do you put together the right good team? They bet right on Semien and Seager.
It's like the Dodgers. The Dodgers can't seem to win a World Series except for the strike year. But again, you feel like they've moved heaven and earth to put the best team on the field.
Yeah, they bet right on Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, who the Yankees should have bet on Freeman. 100,000. It still amazes me that they didn't. And the Dodgers are kind of running into the old man problems that the Yankees have. They haven't been able to keep a whole rotation healthy. I mean, you want to talk about injuries? This season they had some really serious injuries, but the difference is that their supporting cast for the Dodgers is just so much better than the supporting cast for the Yankees. The back half of that 26-man roster, especially hitters, they can do a lot more than the Yankees can. And to me, that's the big problem the Yankees have had. It's not just the star players. Star players would be nice. If you could turn Gleyber Torres into a back half of the roster guy, that'd be incredible. That would be a really strong second baseman if he is your sixth best hitter. Which is why I think it's smart to be talking about Soto and talking about Machado and other players that we could talk about. I think that there's no way this is a long-term successful team without developing young talent. I don't believe they can do it at this point. This was a really disappointing September for me. And I think I think it really closes off your options long-term, the way you want to build a team.
I also think, and we've been saying this for years, but the window's closing. Aaron Judge isn't super young, and Garrett Cole isn't super young. And they're getting to the age when they start to break down. Now, maybe they don't break down in 2024 or 2025, but if they did, I don't think people would say like, "Oh, what a surprise." They had these guys in their younger prime, which they're not in anymore, and they didn't win. They couldn't pull it off for whatever reasons, and we've talked about them. But
yeah, I mean, you hope that they're Hall of Famers in their 30s. I mean, Cole's
correct,
about to win
but
a Cy Young.
you're not going to be able. You can't bet long term on that. Their best years are now. So if you want to take advantage of their greatness, you got to do it now.
If you can go to next season with Austin Wells and Oswald Peraza and Anthony Volpe all ready to go, you're really confident in them. You think that they're really going to be really good hitters. Jason Dominguez. I think it's a different question, right? Because then you could say, well, those are going to be our free agents. Those are going to be the guys who end up, putting up 3, 4, 5, 6 win seasons over the next few years. And Judge and Cole and Rodon and all those guys will be a part of that. But that's just not the situation, right? That's not where the Yankees are right now. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that changes the calculus a little bit. And you still have Cole and Judge. You still have maybe the best hitter and best pitcher in the league. And that's not nothing. You still are going to have one of the best bullpens in the league. You still could have a pretty solid starting rotation. And so, you're still in a world where the window is open, where you could add a couple of players, hope on a couple of bounce backs, hope on some health, especially from starting pitching, maybe add like a Yamamoto or a Lee, or there's another Matsui who's available today.
Yeah.
You could add that's kind of the alternate path. As well, is to start thinking about some of these younger Japanese players. I mean, Lee's Korean, but Lee and Yamamoto are in their 20s. So that's another way we could be thinking about it. The problem is that, I mean, Lee's a lefty, doesn't really hit for a lot of power. I haven't seen any scouting reports on his defense. I don't know where he is in the outfield. But high contact lefty type, it's kind of hard to tell if he's going to be any good in the States. I think he hit 23 home runs one year in the KBO, and that's not a low power league.
Isn't he like a high average?
Yeah,
guy?
He's like I think he's a 340 career hitter, strikes out half as much as he walks. He's just one of those guys. I just don't know how well that translates to the majors. Yamamoto, I'm pretty confident that transmits to the majors. We have a long history there.
All right. So I'm a believer. This is completely off topic, and this is something I'm working on an article for, and it's in its infancy, and it's not going to be an EJ type of article. I write more for our audience. I just like take ideas and I bounce them out there. You actually get in deep into the numbers. You're a deep statistician. But I've been using the number 300 as my base, and I think that's a little of an over an exaggeration, but let's just say 300, but maybe in our head, we're saying 280. I think that you need to have guys who can hit 300, maybe 280, but you need guys who can put the bat on the ball consistently before you start to look at all this other stuff like launch angle and exit velocity and all that kind of stuff. I think when you focus on those types of stats and high walk rates, trying to overshadow a low batting average, you end up with guys like Joey Gallo, who you can argue, look at his numbers, and he's got 32 home runs, and so that gets him 5 WAR. And I'm a big fan of WAR, but whatever. And you end up building a team that has some statistical validity if you look at numbers and you twist them however you want, but that doesn't really have any good ball players. And more, I keep coming back to this idea that the first thing you have to have is a guy who can put the bat on the ball. And throughout the history of baseball, the definition of that has been a 300 hitter. Now, maybe today it's 280, but when you, and then I'll want your opinion, but I just want to finish the thought here. If you look at all the lists of all the various ways, all these experts, sabermetricians, and everybody have ever looked at the history of the game, they always go, by whatever advanced metric they come up with, you still see the same names on top. Ted Williams, Ty Cobb, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig. And the thing that all those guys were trying to do before they were trying to hit home runs was hit 300, because that's really what you had to do. You had to be a 300 hitter. So I have this belief, like the more we said batting average doesn't matter, the more now the reaction is years later, I think batting average matters. And then you can work with those guys to make them better power hitters by maybe helping with their launch angle or their exit velocity or whatever. I said a lot. What do you think?
I don't know. I think your point would be more of an argument for the Yankees like 3 years ago.
No, I'm not talking about just the Yankees. I'm talking about baseball in general, but go on.
I mean, so I've been looking at a couple of rosters while you've been making this argument. So I've been looking at the 2023 Rangers. Really, really great offense. High octane offense, one of the better offenses we've seen in a long time. And they had 2 guys hit above 270. One of which was Corey Seager, hit 327. That's not a lot, right? That's not a high batting average team. That's a team that had a lot of power, got on base, and just was well-rounded. Everybody hit. They didn't have a guy hitting, 180 in the back of the lineup. They had a very round lineup, and they had a couple of guys off the bench who could come up and hit. I look at the Houston Astros, like one of the contactiest teams of the last 10 years, right? I mean, the Astros, I think, have made the ALCS for 8 straight years or something like that.
I think it's 7, but yeah.
And, if you look at their team, there's not a lot of high average guys. There's Jordan Alvarez, there's Jose Altuve, there's Kyle Tucker. There's a bunch of guys who kind of hit in the mid 200s. I'm just now going to look at the Phillies really quickly. And I suspect the Phillies, this year are going to be kind of in a similar spot. Yeah, a lot of guys who kind of hit in the mid 200s, 270. Baseball's a low batting average sport right now. And I think that there's a lot of players who could probably do better as kind of line drive hitters who hit 25 home runs, not 40 home runs, and that kind of thing. But I think the problem with the Yankees is they just don't have good hitters. I don't care what kind of good hitters they are now. They're putting out a lot of guys who are both not hitting not hitting for power and not doing all the other stuff. And to me, that's a much, much, much bigger problem than how you get there.
Yeah, so I think I'm saying the same thing just in a different way, and maybe I'm not articulating it well. I think first you have to have guys that can hit. That's the point.
Well, I mean,
they don't seem to have it.
Yeah, I think this is a discussion that's been around the Yankees player development system and their farm systems. So if you remember the Ben Ruda comments back over the summer, his comments were basically that the Yankees are encouraging players to change their swings to perform well in the metrics. And the metrics are something along the lines of exit velocity, xWOBA, something along those lines. We don't know the specifics. It sounds like they have their own version of xWOBA that kind of gives exit velocity a little bit more of a bump than kind of the StatCast version, but something very similar to that. And I think that there's a good reason to believe that approach works in AA or low A or high A. But as you get to AAA, you get to the majors, it starts to break down. And I think that's what we saw with this group of Yankee prospects this year. A bunch of guys who, to varying degrees, could hit in the minors. And they all, except for Dominguez, had a very similar profile in the minors, which was high strikeout, low batting average, relatively low on base, high power. And I think that right now the evidence suggests that Ben Ruda was right. That approach fizzles out, and you're really losing something in terms of teaching hitting. I don't know how other teams do it. I don't know if other teams are this kind of metric focus, but I think it's a failure.
I agree. All right, so let's get back to Soto for a moment.
Sure.
You're the GM. Hal Steinbrenner calls you into his office. He says, EJ, I've got unbelievable news. The Angels have called me, or no, Shohei Ohtani's agent has called me. And I have a deal in principle. I don't care what the numbers are, right? But I have a deal in principle. He's willing to sign with us. But at the same time, on the other line, the Padres called me. And I have a deal in principle. Like I told them both, you got to give me 24 hours to sort this out because I have one other deal I might work on. So I'm not tricking anybody. I'm not being dishonest. But I have a deal in principle for Juan Soto. That includes the extension. So the money's the same, basically. But I can't afford them both, EJ.
I think I take Soto. And it's hard for me because I love Shohei Ohtani. I don't know when he's going to pitch again or if he's going to pitch again. And
you
right now,
speaking my language, my
he's
friend.
only a DH, and he's a really good hitter, but Soto's a better hitter. And Soto can play the outfield, and he's younger.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So
I'm writing an article on this. You're saying everything I'm saying.
Look, I think that the Giants or someone like that's going to sign Ohtani. I think he'll hopefully pitch again. Like as a baseball fan, I hope that happens.
Of course.
If he hadn't injured his arm, I would be all on it. I just don't think right now he fits the roster. I think he's going to be very overpriced because he's going to command something in between, what he was going to command before, which was untold amounts of money, and what you would pay for a really solid DH. And I don't think that's something the Yankees need right now. I think that they need. Look, Soto is not, Juan Soto is not a consolation prize. It's not like we're choosing between, Shohei in this scenario between Shohei Ohtani and like Anthony Rizzo, right? I mean, this is a better hitter, right? I mean, we're talking about Ohtani is notable because he is a pitcher. If he is only a hitter, he is still really, really fun and really exciting and could hit 50 home runs, but I don't think it's worth the price he's going to pay. If you came back and told me that he's going to be an outfielder.
But you know what? He hasn't really played outfield since 2013 in Japan.
I agree. Well, I agree. I mean, neither did Babe Ruth, right? Like, I think Ohtani could do it, is my guess. I don't think he
hasn't done it in 10 years. I mean, and if you're a team and you envision him pitching again, I just can't see them going like, yeah, get in the outfield.
I mean, the question is does a team want to pay $400 million for a DH who might pitch again?
Somebody will.
I think somebody might, and I think that Ohtani is a very special player. I mean, look, I think if you told me, hey, Ohtani, go be a catcher, I'm pretty sure he could be a pretty good catcher. Like I've got a lot of confidence in Shohei Ohtani.
I hear you. I just go on.
I don't think he makes sense for the Yankees right now. If we're talking about a debate between him and Soto, Soto is just as good of a hitter. He's a better hitter. He can play outfield. And again, he's 25 years old. That's the killer here, right? Like get the young guy on the team, somebody who's going to be on this team for the entire length of Aaron Judge's contract and still be the second best hitter or the best hitter on that team. Soto might be a better hitter than Judge next year. Like it wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, Judge has had an historic 2-year stretch so far. But if you look at Judge's career numbers, I'll take Soto's career numbers over Judge. And that's not saying anything bad about Aaron Judge.
The other thing about Ohtani is he's going to cost in real dollars something like $72 million for the Yankees in 2024.
Because if you get rid of Giancarlo Stanton, you're paying for Ohtani, right? I mean, that's the problem.
Right. And you got to pay for a Stanton. Yep. Like nobody wants him.
I mean, I think you're probably got to get rid of that money anyway, right? Like regardless if you get Ohtani, I think like Stanton's money is sunk.
I agree.
But if you're right, if you
$72 million for
if you release Giancarlo Stanton and you get Shohei Ohtani, he's effectively a $70 million player or something. That's a little crazy.
At that point, you say like, I don't know. All right, so let's move on to something different because there's big news out of Florida today. Kim Ng, the general manager, who's done a great job, has parted ways. I think it was a mutual separation. She didn't like the direction they were going, and I guess they had a mutual option or something. I don't know how it works with GMs, but I think it was an amicable.
You didn't read the story.
I only saw it briefly. Yeah,
okay, so they are hiring a president of baseball operations who was going to be her boss. And she was not happy about that because she has a lot of senior. She's been in the game for a long time. She was just hired as a GM. She doesn't want to be, taking orders from anybody again. And so she decided to leave instead of that.
Okay, so she's out there. She was, I believe, the first ever assistant GM woman. I believe when the Yankees had her as the assistant GM from 1998 to 2001. She's been in the game forever. Highly respected, very smart. The Marlins had a very good year under her leadership this year. First question. If you're the Yankees, do you bring her in to be part of your front office?
I don't think she's going to be anyone's. I don't think she's going to be like an assistant GM or something like that. And so, do I fire Cashman for her? Probably, I do. I don't think that's realistic.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, maybe she'd be willing to be the GM
or Soto either.
I mean, maybe she. I mean, Soto I think is realistic, but I don't. I don't. Maybe she'd be willing to be the GM and make Brian Cashman kind of the senior director of player operations. I don't know if their relationship is still good or not. Think about her last couple of years. She made a killer trade this offseason for Luis Arias. She traded, I think it was Pablo Lopez to the Twins. That was a good team trade for both teams, but Pablo Lopez at 350 this year. I mean, it was really an incredible year from him. She traded or signed Jorge Soler on a bargain deal that turned out really good for them. And I think most importantly, she's developing players. The Marlins have a really solid pitching staff that she kind of, shepherded into the majors. Sandy Alcantara, I mean, real sad that this can be a Tommy John surgery because he was just an incredible player. I'm really going to miss Sandy Alcantara next year. But also Jesus Rosardo, Braxton Garrett, Yuri Perez, AJ Puck came up this year as a closer. I mean, they've really brought up a lot of really good young pitchers. And in terms of hitters, it's not the best group of players, but there's some players on here that, like Jazz Chisholm Jr., Brian De La Cruz, who are better than anything the Yankees have brought up anytime recently. So, I think she's had a strong record. She hasn't been there for that long, and that club has really turned around. I think that she's going to get a job somewhere, and I think that she's a really strong GM. And, again, if I could wave a magic wand and get rid of Cashman and put there, I think I would do it. I think I go the Jeter, the Jeter Wen combo, right? I mean, that would be a lot of fun.
Kim Ng is a graduate of the Ridgewood Public Schools.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I believe she graduated in 1986, which is the same year of some other really smart baseball people who you might talk to every Monday night from 9 to.
There you go.
But I didn't graduate Ridgewood. I graduated Midland Park. I didn't go to.
I was going to say, come on. Did you know her in high school?
No, I did not know her. She was in the next town. But
I think. Look, I think that. I think the Yankees should change their GM. We've talked about that before, and I think that she, with my pick, David Stearns, off the market, I think that she is a really solid candidate. Should there be a GM opening, I think she's going to end up as the Red Sox GM or there's a couple of other GM openings right now. The Padres might be open soon, etc. So I think she's going to get a good job, but I don't think it's within New York.
Right, because the Yankees seem to be, for whatever reason, and you hear all sorts of like Brian Cashman and Hal Steinbrenner grew up together under, like they've their lives have been so intertwined. Hal will never get rid of Brian. Whatever, I don't know. They're best friends, or even outside of baseball. I don't know if any of that kind of stuff is true. How would I know? Is there a chance outside of that stuff, like that Hal Steinbrenner is sitting there right now saying, the more respected GM is available. She's out there. Is this the moment? One of these days, it's sort of like the Bryce Harper thing. It's sort of like the Juan Soto thing. If you don't get the superstar, somebody else does, and that person performs great for that other team.
Yeah, look, I think David Stearns was that guy. I mean, that to me, that's the one that was a real missed opportunity. The Mets picked him up as soon as possible.
All right. So,
by the way, Billy Epler also left the Mets, and I imagine Billy Epler is also maybe a potential Yankees assistant GM type soon. He's kind of bounced around lately.
Yeah, I'm not a big Billy Epler guy.
He hasn't been great lately. The Angels and the Mets have not been great. I think he's with the Marlins really briefly under Jeter too. Look, I think that there's a reason why you don't hire your friends for important jobs. One reason why I wouldn't want to hire Derek Jeter is it'd be really tough to fire him. the New Jersey Devils, my other love, have a guy named Martin Brodeur, Hall of Fame goaltender for the team, who's been working in the team's front office and kind of started as kind of a businessy, PR kind of role. And now he's kind of come into a real hockey role. And it always makes me nervous because I don't want to fire Marty Brodeur. I don't know who would, you could run out of town if you fire him. I'm hesitant to do it.
This is
and I think that's the same argument for the why it's bad to have one of your longtime friends as GM in Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman.
Yes, and it's one of the reasons I never wanted Mattingly to be the Yankee manager. I just like Don Mattingly to me and so many people my age, like he was the guy. And he was so good for those few years in the mid 80s. Like he was just Don Mattingly's like he's our generation's Mickey Mantle. He wasn't Mickey as a ball player for as long enough time or anything like that. But my goodness, I don't ever want to watch a game and see Mattingly sitting on the bench and be like, Donnie, you're killing me. Oh my God, what a terrible move. That Mattingly guy's an idiot.
He was on the bench for a while, right?
But he was a coach and it was fine.
Yeah, and he left for a better job, which is the way he ended up leaving. It's hard to have a better job than manager of the Yankees. And frankly, Mattingly doesn't have a great record.
No, he doesn't.
As a manager, I wonder. He was a hitting coach for the Blue Jays this year. I'd love to see him back as a hitting coach. Looks like Sean Casey's coming back. By the way, Sean Casey has his own podcast, his own show on YouTube called "With the Mayor's Office," and I watched a clip of him today discussing the Yankees. His time with the Yankees. It's interesting. I think he almost tampered by saying it'd be really great if we, I forget what player he was saying. It'd be really great. Jordan Montgomery. It'd be really great if we got Jordan Montgomery back. I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to say that. But he was talking about his time with the Yankees. He didn't say much, frankly. He was very excited. He was telling a little bit of kind of his personal feelings about coming back into the game and it being a whirlwind and all of that. But he said a couple of interesting things that I wanted to point out. One is he was talking about data given to the team. And one thing he says, it's not that different from back when I played. We still got, pretty detailed scouting reports to go into every season. We still had hitters meetings about what guys throw, what they like to throw on the first pitch. But what he said was that there was a lot more numbers involved. It wasn't just this guy throws a slider. It's this guy throws a slider 68% of the time on the first pitch or something like that. And I find that interesting because I think it's the wrong way to approach analytics. I think from the front office's perspective, knowing things like what is a guy's exit velocity, what is his launch, what is his average launch angle, how often this guy throw a slider, is this guy good throwing a slider or whatever, is this guy good against two-seam fastballs? I think it's all really valuable information that the players should not be concerned with, because the second the players start making plans based on scouting reports, then teams can make counter plans based on knowing that they know the scouting reports. So for example, the Yankees at the beginning of the season, they started making the decision. This was they talked about this, to swing earlier in the count because they were getting a lot of first pitch called strikes. But of course, if you know that and you're a pitcher, your logical move is to throw a breaking pitch in the first in the count. You saw the Yankees swinging and missing a lot on those first pitches. And again, the problem is that you're taking numbers that are useful when nobody knows they exist. And
I think you just hit the nail on the head.
So as soon as, for example, players start saying what I need to do is increase my exit velocity, that's a problem. No, look, I can tell if a good player is good or not based upon their very simple stats, and players can make, can try to, I would say, increase their WAR, right? That's a nice thing to increase, right? Hit better, hit more balls that are hits, hit more home runs, take more walks, strike out a little bit less. Even strike out a little bit less, I don't care that much about. But once we start talking about them trying to maximize their process stats, well, that's just leading to a gap between processes and outcomes, right? That is not the goal. The goal is to get hits, and the means to get there is hit ball hard. And to me, I think that Casey was articulating this approach to the game that I think is wrong. I think the Yankees are using analytics very poorly. And I think it's, we talked about Michael Fishman, the analytics director for the Yankees, and he's the face of their analytics department. But the way he talks about analytics, it very much sounds like this. that it's about, he wants players to emphasize process over outcomes. The reason why you care about an exit velocity or something like that is you might have a player whose gap between process and outcomes is going to revert back to the mean. That is, you have a player who's been hitting the ball hard. The results haven't been there, but the results probably will be there in the future. And you as a front office can bet on that player. You can bet that Luke Voigt is going to come up the minors after hitting the crap out of the ball and hitting the majors. But you don't need Luke Voigt to be like, well, my exit velo went up by 1 mile per hour. That's not productive in his part. He's a reactive player. He's a hitter. He's got to see a slider and hit it or not swing at it. Now, Casey, to his defense, said like, hey, like the analytics are there. But one thing I tried to emphasize was, you have to kind of at some point just kind of get into a certain headspace, go up to the plate and react, which is good. I think that he's a professional. John Casey was a damn good hitter. I mean, he understands that. I worry though, just the way he was talking about it, and this is probably because he's a midseason addition. It makes sense. It sounded like Casey was basically doing what the organization told him to, and that the organization, there's broader people beyond, the people, the uniformed coaches in the dugout that are emphasizing this style of decision-making analytics that are harmful.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the numbers that other people don't know. That was the whole thing behind Moneyball. That was the whole thing when the Yankees got good again. Gene Michael said, we're going to get guys who get on base. We're going to take pitches and walk a lot. And I think, as you've pointed out in the past, rather brilliantly, I might add, that was the last time Cashman had superhero status. I think that was his superhero or his super ability, was he was able to find the Didi Gregoriuses and the Gio Urshela's and the Luke Voigts and the whoever's, maybe Curtis Granderson, who had these hidden power numbers. Might have been exit velo, it might have been launch angle, it might have been a combination, whatever they were. He was really, and his team were the only ones looking at that. So they could go, hey, look, there's a guy in the St. Louis system whose numbers like that nobody else is looking at are off the chart. Let's get that guy. And then they got him, and then he was great for a short period of time. But in the meantime, everybody else realized what happened. Like, oh, these are the numbers he's using to find these unknown guys who are doing great. And once everybody else knows the number, you've lost, it's kryptonite. You've lost your superpower. Everybody has the same power.
So I agree with everything you just said, but it's actually not what I meant.
Oh,
so everything you said is right. And we've talked about this before. What I mean is that the second that you tell players,
we're talking about two different things. I agree.
Right.
But
what I'm saying is the players shouldn't know about the exit velo or launch angle or xWOBA numbers.
100%.
Those are for the front office to make a decision about, and the players should try to get hits and walk and hit home runs and play good defense and run and all that kind of stuff. And really this discussion about exit velo should not really involve the players at all. Maybe you can think about swing changes and trying to get hit the ball harder, and that's an off-season discussion, et cetera. But like, I think that you use those numbers to evaluate players from afar. It really does feel like the Yankees essentially took it too literally. I've been reading recently Michael Lewis's new book, not Moneyball, but on Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, interesting. Before we get there, I just want to wrap this up. This main point, because I agree with you, and so I was really saying two different things. Cashman, that's not the manager, that's the GM, when is getting his market efficiency that he found, that you pointed out weeks and weeks and weeks ago, was using whatever stats that nobody else knew, and that's how the Yankees were able to get these guys and then be competitive. I also agree with you that you shouldn't give those numbers to the players, because the players, it's too much information. And I'm going to go back to the point I made way earlier. I think if you try to tell the players whether or not they can do it or not, we just want you putting the bat on the ball and doing what you do because we want you on base. In other words, we want you to be a 300 hitter, if that's possible, right? Like, then the other stuff comes. Instead of trying to have better, I'm going to try to have a better exit velocity, I'd rather say to the player, I want you just to hit the ball. let's make contact. Let's learn to go the other way and things like that. But anyway, get to the Sam Bankman-Fried. I want to hear this.
So, this is a Michael Lewis book. Normally in Michael Lewis, the hero is kind of the weirdo. The guy, the Island of Misfit Toys, the Billy Bean, the guys in The Big Short, the two psychologists who want to be economists in The Undoing Project, etc. And he's written that book a million times. And I think he started off looking to write that book about Sam Bankman-Fried because he was kind of on top of the world when crypto was on top of the world. Then crypto collapsed, I think, predictably, and he ended up being a criminal, basically. I mean, or an alleged criminal who's currently on trial, losing everything and really crashing a lot of people's lives. And when you hear Lewis recount Bankman-Fried reasoning and talking, you hear somebody that I think understands math but doesn't understand numbers, if this makes sense.
You're blowing my mind here because I have something to come back at you with, but go on.
He will often say, I'm doing this because there is a X probability chance of something happening. And he's assigning a probability to a fundamentally uncertain problem. I mean, I am not a person afraid of numbers, right? I mean, this is what I do for a living. But you have to have some humility about the data and about the probabilities and about the numbers. And you have to understand that numbers are giving you a window on the world that is very, very complex and is much more than just the numbers that you're seeing. And to me, I think this is the mistake that I think the Yankees are making. Now, I'm inside their decision making. I could be wrong about this, but it really does feel like the Yankees are taking a very simplistic view of how analytics works. And I blame their analytics department for this because every public comment I hear from them follows the same theme of being very naive about how much, or not being naive, being overconfident in how much you can know from your baseball statistics. And I think that there's a happy medium where you're using analytics smartly, but you're also understanding that intuition and kind of long, hard-earned expertise and coaching and all the traditional things are also really important. And you need those to make a player into an effective hitter and not what we saw out of Volpe and Wells and Pereira and Peraza and all those guys this season.
Brilliant. I know somebody who's working on a PhD in math and says tongue in cheek, and this is the highest level math, like this stuff, but pool theory and ring theory and catenary rings and non-cat. I mean, I don't even know what he's talking about, but and then when a math problem comes up, like what's 37 times 54 or something like that? I can't do math.
That's what a calculator is for.
I can do crazy math, but I don't do simple math.
I mean, look,
numbers are different. Right?
One of the things that we teach our PhD students is that in order to get this PhD, you need to make an original contribution to the field. And in politics, that's easy because politics is always changing. There's always a new thing to study, or the old stuff we have to reevaluate. You don't have to reevaluate math from the past. And so to get a math PhD these days, you have to do a lot. You have to go into the weirdo stuff.
Yes. And Angela's saying analytics are used in college baseball. I assume they are, but I wasn't talking about baseball. I was just talking about getting a PhD.
A lot of the new age
mathematics.
A lot of the really new age stuff, like again, the Dylan Lawson stuff, comes out of college coaching. And I think it is very debatable how effective it's been at the major league level. There are some really successful college coaches who've become major league coaches on good teams. I believe the Astros have a former college coach. I think the Dodgers might as well. But I think that there's good reason to believe that their approach is kind of an approach that works against not great pitchers.
I don't disagree. EJ, we've come to the end of the hour. It always goes much too quickly. Thanks, Angelo, for the questions. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. This, of course, is also going to be on Start Spreading the News, the world's greatest Yankee site, really without exception. There's nobody who does it like we do. There's nobody does it like we do. We're the best. And so you should be reading that art. You should be reading that blog at least 3 times every single day. EJ, thank you. We'll be back again here Monday night next